believe me? And I said, yes, I believe you. And that was the change.
The Cosby Show wasn't just a hit, it was a television revolution. It shattered stereotypes, redefined the American family sitcom, and turned its cast into household names. But behind the cozy Brooklyn brownstone, something else was happening. Actors were vanishing from the screen, and nobody seemed to have a straight answer why. For 8 seasons, from 1984 to 1992, audiences fell in love with the Huxtables. Dr. Heathcliff Huxtable, his sharp and elegant wife Claire, and their 5 kids. It was warm, funny, aspirational, and a ratings juggernaut. But the picture-perfect family image hit a set full of quiet tension, clashing egos, and one man's iron grip on the show's vision: Bill Cosby himself. No departure caused more buzz than Lisa Bonet's. As Denise Huxtable, she was the cool, free-spirited daughter with an eclectic style that set trends and made her an icon. On screen, she was the artistic soul of the family. Off screen, she was just as independent. And that independence would eventually put her on a collision course with Cosby. Cosby wanted The Cosby Show to be more than entertainment. It was a carefully crafted image of wholesome family life, and he expected his cast to reflect that image in real life. He was part star, part father figure, part gatekeeper, weighing in on everything from careers to personal choices. For a while, Lisa played along. But as she grew older, her ambitions started pulling her in a very different direction. And that's when the trouble began. The first real crack in Lisa Bonet's relationship with The Cosby Show came in 1987, and it started with a role that shocked everyone. At just 19, she signed on for Angel Heart, a dark, twisted psychological thriller miles away from the wholesome Huxtable world. Starring opposite Mickey Rourke, Bonet played Epiphany Proudfoot, a voodoo priestess caught in a web of violence, mystery, and seduction. The role demanded emotional vulnerability and pushed her into territory no sitcom had ever taken her, including an explicit scene so provocative it almost earned the film an X rating. For Lisa, it was a bold artistic leap. For Bill Cosby, it was a disaster. America's sweetheart Denise Huxtable in a violent, sexually charged film? In his eyes, it risked tarnishing the carefully built image of the Cosby Show brand. Publicly, the tension was downplayed. Privately, it was electric. Lisa defended her choice, insisting she was more than just Denise and deserved the chance to prove herself as a serious actress. But that was the problem. Cosby saw her as part of a collective brand, while she saw herself as an independent artist. The solution? A spin-off. A different world would follow Denise to Hillman College, giving Bonet her own stage while keeping her in the Cosby universe. But even here, trouble followed. The first season kept the squeaky clean tone of The Cosby Show and felt unrealistic to many. Then came Debbie Allen, a powerhouse director and producer, determined to shake things up. She injected real issues into the show: racism, sexual assault, activism. It worked, transforming a different world into something groundbreaking. But that transformation would happen without Lisa Bonet. What finally pushed Lisa Bonet out of a different world wasn't a script or a storyline. It was her personal life. In late 1987, during the show's first season, she secretly eloped with musician Lenny Kravitz. Soon after, she became pregnant with their daughter, Zoe Kravitz. When production prepared for season 2, Bonet and Kravitz shared the news with Bill Cosby and the producers. A bold idea was floated: write Denise Huxtable's pregnancy into the show. But to Cosby, an unmarried Denise becoming a single mother on screen clashed with the squeaky clean, idealized world he'd built. He refused. Instead, Denise was abruptly written out, with a vague creative differences explanation. On screen, she simply dropped out of Hillman College. Behind the scenes, the reality was clear. Bonet wanted authenticity. Cosby wanted control. Debbie Allen then retooled the show around Dwayne Wayne and Whitley Gilbert, and it thrived for 5 more seasons, without its original star. Then in 1989 came the twist. Lisa Bonet returned to The Cosby Show. Denise was reintroduced as a married woman who traveled to Africa, wed Navy Lieutenant Martin Kendall, and become stepmother to his young daughter Olivia, played by a scene-stealing Raven Simonet. The move avoided the unwed mother storyline entirely, boosted ratings and made it seem like fences had been mended. But the peace didn't last. Old tensions resurfaced. Reports of lateness, creative clashes, and friction behind the scenes made it clear that Lisa Bonet's return to the Huxtable home was only temporary. By 1991, the cracks between Lisa Bonet and The Cosby Show could no longer be smoothed over. The creative differences excuse was rolled out one last time. But this time, there would be no spin-off, no return, no heartfelt farewell. Denise was quietly written off, said to be living in Asia with her husband. She was barely mentioned in the final season and absent from the finale entirely. Bonet's exit wasn't a single moment. It was a slow unraveling of artistic and personal conflict. On one side was Bill Cosby, fiercely protective of his moral vision. On the other was Bonet, determined to grow beyond Denise Huxtable's clean-cut box. That generational and ideological clash ended with her exile from the very stage that made her a star. But Bonet wasn't the only one to face turbulence behind the scenes. Joseph C. Phillips, who played Denise's husband, Lieutenant Martin Kendall, joined in season 6 as part of the storyline that brought Denise home with stepdaughter Olivia, played by a young Raven Simonet. On screen, they were the picture of stability. Off-screen, Phillips recalls it being anything but. In a candid blog years later, Phillips described a tense, draining work environment, especially with his two main scene partners, Lisa Bonet and Bill Cosby. He said Bonet often showed up late, unprepared, and distant, mumbling lines and projecting open disdain for the show. For Phillips, it made creating believable on-screen chemistry nearly impossible. And while the audience saw a warm, loving couple, he remembers a set strained by disengagement and frustration, a far cry from the wholesome family image the show sold to millions. While working with Lisa Bonet was frustrating, Joseph C. Phillips says his experience with Bill Cosby was, in some ways, worse and far more disillusioning. Like many black actors of his generation, Phillips had grown up admiring Cosby as a barrier breaker and cultural icon. Landing a role on The Cosby Show felt like a dream, but that dream soured quickly. Phillips describes Cosby as volatile and controlling, recalling one incident in particular. During a taping, Cosby didn't like the way he delivered a line. Instead of pulling him aside, Cosby stopped everything and tore into him, in front of the entire cast, crew, and live studio audience. Phillips was humiliated. After that, he says, he walked on eggshells, afraid that any misstep would trigger another public outburst. Between a co-star he felt was disengaged and a boss he now saw as a bully, Phillips found himself in a job that felt less like an opportunity and more like a minefield. He was a secondary character with little creative input, his main purpose tied to Denise's storyline. Once Lisa Bonet was gone for good in 1991, so was Martin Kendall's real reason for being there. Martin and Olivia stayed through season 7, but without Denise, their presence was awkward. In the 8th and final season, Phillips's role was slashed to just a few appearances, explained away by Martin being on naval deployment. Olivia, thanks to Raven Simonet's undeniable charm, stayed as a main character, effectively raised by Cliff and Claire. Phillips wasn't officially fired, but he'd been phased out. By the time the show wrapped, he says he was relieved. His dream job had left him disenchanted with television and deeply disappointed in the man he had once idolized. His account backs up long-standing claims about Cosby's controlling nature. It also shows that the behind-the-scenes tension wasn't just about Lisa Bonet's defiance. It was part of a larger atmosphere where actors either fell in line or risked public humiliation and quiet erasure. Joseph C. Phillips didn't leave because of one big blow-up, but because the day-to-day reality of the job became unbearable. And while his and Lisa Bonet's exits are the most famous, they weren't the only ones that hinted at the complicated dynamics behind The Cosby Show. Take Sabrina LaBeouf, who played eldest daughter Sandra Huxtable. Her exit wasn't dramatic, but her place on the show was always different. Sandra didn't appear in the pilot. She was away at Princeton, introduced as the brainy, high-achieving firstborn. Casting her was contentious from the start. Whitney Houston was reportedly in the running, but chose music instead. When LaBeouf got the role, she was 26, just 10 years younger than Felicia Rashad, who played her mother. Cosby was hesitant, saying she didn't look young enough, but the casting director pushed for her talent, and she got the part. From there, Sandra's presence was inconsistent. Some episodes centered on her relationship with Elvin Thibodeau. Later, her marriage and twins, Nelson and Winnie. But she'd disappear for stretches, officially because she was grown, married, and busy with her own life. Behind the scenes, though, it may have been more about focus. The Cosby Show was, at its core, about parenting, and Cosby was most engaged when playing the wise, hands-on dad. Once Sandra's parenting was done, and she was raising her own kids off-screen, her storylines drifted away from Cliff and Claire's household. That's why the addition of little Olivia was so perfect for Cosby's style. She brought a preschooler back into the home, allowing the show to recapture the charm of Rudy's early years. Sandra had grown up, and in a series built around a father's influence, that made her far less central to the story. Sabrina LaBeouf never aired the kind of grievances Joseph C. Phillips did. By all accounts, she stayed on good terms with her TV family, joining reunions and speaking warmly about her time on The Cosby Show. Her exit wasn't about conflict. It was about fading from the spotlight as the show's focus shifted away from Sandra. When the series ended, LaBeouf didn't chase more sitcom fame. Instead, she thrived in theater, especially with the Shakespeare Theater Company in Washington, D.C. Maybe that was always the plan. The broad rhythms of sitcom life simply weren't where her artistic heart lived. Hers was a quiet departure, a gentle drift toward new challenges rather than a headline-making split. Jeffrey Owens, who played Sandra's husband Elvin Thibodeau, followed a similar on-screen path, only he never left at all. Introduced in season 2 as a traditionalist who sparred constantly with Claire over gender roles, Elvin gradually evolved into a loving husband and father, still endearingly clueless at times. Owens played him with perfect comedic timing, and his arc was typical for a character marrying into the main family. But Owens's most revealing chapter came after the show ended, a story that would say just as much about the legacy of The Cosby Show as anything that happened on set. In 2018, decades after The Cosby Show ended, a photo of Jeffrey Owens bagging groceries at a Trader Joe's in New Jersey went viral. Some media outlets framed it as a fallen star moment, but the public saw something else entirely: dignity. Fans, fellow actors, and strangers rallied behind him, praising his work ethic and honesty. Owens handled it with grace, explaining that the job gave him flexibility to audition, provide for his family, and keep pursuing his craft. The viral moment sparked an overdue conversation about the financial realities of acting, even for someone from one of TV's biggest hits, and it didn't hurt his career. Offers rolled in, including a recurring role in a Tyler Perry series. Still, Owens's journey revealed the long shadow of playing Elvin Thibodeau. It was a role that brought years of steady work, but made it harder to be seen as anything else. Unlike Lisa Bonet, who fought to break from her character's image, or Joseph C. Phillips, who left a toxic set, Owens's story showed another truth. Even without conflict, life after The Cosby Show could mean returning to the uncertain grind of a working actor. And running through every story, Bonet's rebellion, Phillips's disillusionment, LaBeouf's quiet drift, Owens's reinvention, was the unshakable pull of Bill Cosby. He was the sun around which everything revolved, his vision dictating the scripts, his persona setting the tone, and his authority shaping the set. For the show to work, everyone had to align with his worldview. What made The Cosby Show unique wasn't just its success. It was the intense moral image it projected, an image Cosby expected his cast to live up to, off-screen as well. When Bonet filmed Angel Heart, it wasn't only the show's reputation he thought she tarnished. It was, in his mind, a personal betrayal. When Lisa Bonet became pregnant out of wedlock, Bill Cosby's refusal to write it into the show wasn't just a creative call, it was a moral stance. The Cosby Show sold a very specific brand of family values, and an unmarried pregnant Denise didn't fit the product. Joseph C. Phillips' story drives the point home. His public dressing down wasn't just about a bad line reading. It was a display of power, a warning. Step out of line, and you'd be reminded exactly who was in charge. Those who left or faded away were the ones who broke orbit. Bonet's orbit was bold and unpredictable. Her artistic independence couldn't stay tethered to Cosby's vision. Phillips was forced out by the toxic atmosphere created by the very man he once idolized. Sabrina LaBeouf's Sandra simply drifted to the background as the show narrowed its focus back to the Huck stables under one roof. These departures weren't just about contracts or creative differences. They were deeply human stories about power, identity, and the cost of integrity. They showed what happens when the glossy illusion of a perfect TV family crashes into the messy, complicated realities of the people behind the roles. The Huxtable living room glowed with warmth on Thursday nights, but just outside that glow were the shadows of control, ego, and conflict. And it's in those shadows that the real reasons for these exits live. For years, fans only saw the laughter, the love, and the lessons. Now they know the other side, the untold departures that are every bit as much a part of the Cosby Show's legacy as the moments that made America fall in love with it.